Well, hi everyone. We're back again talking about calling. Jeff Hopper, Jeffrey Cranford. And Jeffrey, I want to talk a little bit now about what it really looks like when someone is in their place of calling, in their sweet spot. I know you may want to weave a little bit of your personal experience in here because you have been somebody very much in your sweet spot for a number of years now. You and I have found great value in Os Guinness's work, The Call, and he makes this statement in his work: the truth is not that God is finding us a place for our gifts, but that God has created us and our gifts for a place of His choosing.
Yes.
And I know you would say that's been true in your life, correct?
Well, there's no question about it. And, you know, recently, and I'm doing a series on this at one of our fellowships, and I've thought a lot about that. What was it that inspired me to believe in a calling, a specific calling, as if there was something? And I've thought deeply about that, and I can't pinpoint either a particular teaching or something I read specifically, a particular story or something. I think it was a kind of a cumulative building thing as I studied the Bible through the years, and even really being a Jesus follower, it just seemed to be the common thread that ran through the entirety of that. And so as I think back about that idea, and for me, it was about a 6-month period. I had gone through a real tragedy in my own life, and I felt like it was a sink or swim moment. And a lot of people will discuss their calling coming out of tragedy as opposed to just being kind of a linear progression of wonderful things in their life, and oh yeah, I'll add calling to it. Oftentimes it goes down into the really from a pit of despair, and then kind of climbing out of that and realizing that there's purpose again with calling. But that happened with me, you know, almost 20 years ago, and it was just it took a season of prayer. I took a season of, well, Lord, I really want to know. I want to hear your voice. I want to sense why I'm here. And if I'm not here with a purpose, then I'll live as I want. But if I am here with a purpose, I know and I believe through the Scripture that you have a purpose for me. And it evolved out of that. And He gave me some specific scriptures that were, I knew spoke specifically to me. And then He confirmed it in so many different ways, which is another element of calling. I think that how do you hear from the Lord? He does in amazing ways confirm it. And it is supernatural. We cannot come to this as just dry theology. This is interaction with our Creator. This is interaction with the living God. And so we should not only assume that it's possible, but we should anticipate that it's probable, which is very different. It could happen. No, you need to anticipate that God's going to engage you as you continue to seek Him for His calling on your life, and then ways in which you can steward that calling. And of course, then we could get into the infinite thoughts of stewardship, which Jesus talked often about.
Well, I think obviously that there's a measure of pleasure going on there. When I am in my calling, I really, I just enjoy this. I thrive on it. And yet I also know that the flesh also attracts us by pleasure.
Yes.
So for instance, I could say, well, I'm retired now and I'm just going to play golf every day because I just really love that, and therefore it must be my calling because there's an aspect of pleasure to it. I've found my spot, and yet that can be wrongly used as well. Where's that fine line? Well,
and the balance, again, there's going to be a tension in that. There always will be a tension. I never sit with any men that ever feel like, you know what, every decision I make, every impulse that I have is directed towards my calling, selflessness, humility. Nobody's there except for Jesus. I mean, Jesus walked perfectly in that. That's why we follow Him. We don't lead Him. And so I know there will always be a dynamic tension in all of us who are pursuing calling and wondering, are we walking this out in the fullness of that? But I tell folks all the time, if I'm waiting to become perfect in my intention, if I'm waiting to not be a mixed bag and to have everything perfectly sanctified in my life, you'll never start down that road. It's just not going to happen. And I think you could even take someone like a Billy Graham, for instance. And I don't know Billy Graham, never met Billy Graham. I've been at one of his crusades when I was a kid. I have a strong suspicion that if we were to sit down and say, what were your key motivations, that he would give us some glorious motivations for what he did. But I'm sure there would be an element that he would probably suggest, you know, it was a little bit heady stuff. They're having millions of people come to these crusades across the country.
Right.
And how much of that was prompted by a flesh versus this? I just don't think we can get that introspective. It's important to judge ourselves. Are we being selfishly motivated? For sure. But I think we just have to live in the tension and recognize that we are in process, all of us. And that includes the Apostle Paul. You know, when I think back about the scriptures, the Apostle Paul started out by defending his apostleship. I am not the least of the most eminent apostles, and he would make, and then you see letters written later in his life. I think 2 Timothy was the final letter that he wrote. And you can just see a total movement into humility. He begins to say things like, I'm the chief of sinners, and various places throughout some of his later letters that he makes it apparent that he recognizes his own mixed bag. Well, what if he had waited on his calling on the road to Damascus or after his preparation and said, well, I'm not perfect yet. I can't start this journey. Well, chances are we wouldn't have any of the letters to the Galatians, the Ephesians, the Philippians, the Colossae, you know, the Colossians and the Corinthians. I mean, he went out knowing that he was going to be transferred. And that's the last thing I want to say. We are actually transformed through the process of our calling, as opposed to being perfect, transformed, and then having our calling. It's our calling that transforms us. It's the thing that keeps us motivated and pursuing. And so I would just encourage people to recognize, if you're waiting for perfection before you really move into your calling, that's going to be a long wait. We go ahead and engage, whether that's a preparatory season or actually starting some of the, you know, things. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, and I think there's some parameters there that I want to talk to you about when we talk again, because I know that right now you're doing some teaching on what it means to be called as an ambassador, which could apply to a lot of specific scenarios. So let's talk about that next time.